Check, check. Test, test. Hello, hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out to the first Monzo Open Office of 2019. Can I get a quick show of hands if this is anyone's first time at a Monzo Open Office? Wow, lots of new people here. Thank you all for coming. Hope you're enjoying the food and drink. My name is Simon B. I am an operations and community specialist here at Monzo. Now, one of the topics that came up recently on our community forum was whether Monzo could be considered a quote-unquote social media company. And the justification for that was that your average Monzo user now has 10 or more contacts in their app and interacts with them in very social ways, whether it's emoji reactions or the messages that people send. And that's really interesting to think about. And I think it's really interesting that we live in an age where the technology enables us to blur those lines between what used to be very disparate services. And I think if you asked 1.5 million, we're almost at, Monzo customers about what kind of app we were, apart from the obvious stuff being a bank, you might not get 1.5 million different answers, but you'd get a lot of different answers. And the same goes if you asked our staff. Now, despite that, there are some constants. As mentioned, we are a bank, stating the obvious. But one of the other constants is that we are, and we always have been, a data-driven company. And some people hear that word data and they think about that scene in The Matrix where Neo's looking at the code and they think just numbers and analysis and crunching, and that's not the truth, actually. It might be a bit of a cliche to say it, but data is everything and everything is data. It can be human, it can be nuanced, and if you live by those principles as a company and you have smart people that understand how to use that data, I mean, they are called data scientists, so that's how it works. And if you have that, then truly the possibilities are almost infinite for what you can do with it. So today, my colleague Annabelle, who is one of our data scientists, is going to be talking to you about what data looks like at Monzo and how it informs our product development. And over the last year, that's gone from being a very sort of self-contained discipline to something that's scaled in what we call a horizontal way. So you have data scientists across the company in different teams, much like engineers and designers. So she's going to talk to you about how that's impacted the company as we've grown over the last year and what that looks like moving forward. So can I please get a round of applause for Annabelle?
So, hi, good evening. First of all, thank you very much for being here tonight. It's really impressive to see how many of you have turned up. So my name is Annabelle. I'm a product data scientist, and I've joined Monzo a year ago in January 2018. And so tonight I'm going to talk about how data inform product decisions at Monzo. So I'm just going to start by introducing the data team. So Dimitri Massin is actually the first member of the data team. He joined back in May 2016, and from the start, he fought very hard of what principles and value should guide a successful data team in a fast-growing and ambitious startup like Monzo. And basically, he laid out some of his thoughts in this blog post, and I'm going to introduce them a bit later. So, as you can see from the charts, the data team has actually been growing pretty quickly over the past year. So, Dimitri joined in 2016, and then was joined by Nigel at the start of 2017. I was the third person to join in January 2018, and was quickly followed by a wave of very nice colleagues. So yeah, if you have a quick look at the titles, you will see that we have quite like a diverse team in terms of like skills and background, and that really enables us to effectively serve different parts of the business. So like the data team has a mission, and that mission is to enable better decisions faster at Monzo. And like the last part, the faster part, is really the important bits in a business like ours. So in terms of like how we work, we're like guided by a set of key principles. So first of all, everyone in the team is empowered and trusted to prioritize their work themselves. And in terms of like trust, it's not only inside the team, because we all have access to a lot of customer data, but it's also being like trusted by the stakeholders outside the team with who we work on a daily basis. As I said, like speed is really important. So whenever possible, we try to automate the simple and repetitive task, and we empower the rest of the business to answer their own data question, thanks to like self-serve analytics powered by Looker. And we also run quite a few knowledge sharing sessions. So we aim to be a real agile team, and we impact small and big decisions on like a daily basis. So in terms of what we value when it comes to our work, we aim to make our analysis like repeatable, because very often you're not going to do one analysis only once, and to save us the time to like repeat that analysis, we try to automate the process using Looker. So data quality is everyone's responsibility. We don't have like a separate team looking after or like ETL, so the way we like ingest data into our database, and we trust each other to maintain a high level of data quality. We make sure that data is used appropriately across the business. So we know if someone is using convenient data, it's our responsibility to speak up and make sure like decisions are backed by data whenever possible. So we share our knowledge with the rest of the company through training sessions. We try to keep our analysis simple, so the rest of the company can use them really easily. We, of course, take security and user privacy very seriously. We give feedback to each other to grow as a team. We try not to get stuck in analysis paralysis and always aim to reach the finish line. So that's the kind of like 80-20 principle. And we enable others to do their job. So in terms of how we work with product squads, so the product analytics team is currently supporting parts of the product team. And you can think about two main product teams, so the growth team and the main account team. And each of these team is divided into 3 product squads. And each squad has dedicated analysts. So if you look at the growth team, I'm working currently with the virality squad that is looking after all the referrals program and the features that have like the potential to become viral. Like Share Tab would be an example of that. Annabelle is working with the engagement team that's looking after user onboarding and engagement, so looking after reactivating users who might have churn, and making sure that the content that we present to users is like relevant to them. There's also the revenue squad with who Katie is working. So this is more about like identifying new revenue opportunities. And then on the other side, if you look at the main account team, there are like also like 3 squads. So the hub team that's with who Alicia is working with, which aims to give our users a visibility on whole of their financial life. The financial health team with whom I'm also working that is helping users make savings. So you could think of features like energy switching, and the savings and investment team. Again, Alicia is working with them, and I think in that case the title is pretty descriptive. So what do we do on a day-to-day basis to support those product squads as analysts? Oops, sorry, wrong direction. So especially at the beginning of the quarter, we work quite closely with product managers to help them define what are the key metrics that the team is going to have an impact on. And if needed, we help them set up the relevant dashboards. We also spend quite a bit of time designing and analyzing experiments. So what we mean by experiments is mostly A/B tests. So we basically take random samples of users that are similar to each other, and we give to one segment the current version of a feature, and to the other segment the new version of a feature, and then we study the way these groups behave to see the impact of the change. So we have been using quite a lot of experiments over the past year at Monzo to drive product decisions. I think when I join, on any given time, there will be maybe 1 or 2 experiments running. Now I think on average it's more 10 to 15. So we have really invested on that front. Sometimes we will do some more in-depth analysis. So you could think, for example, of segmentation analysis. So helping product managers understand a bit better the composition of our user base and the behaviors of different segments, because that's quite useful when you think about personalization. And we also work from time to time on some machine learning projects. So for example, if you want to detect automatically inbound transactions that are actual salaries. So in the next part of the talk, I'm just going to speak about examples of projects where we use data to drive some important product decisions at Monzo. So for some of you who joined Monzo some time ago, you might remember the waiting list. How many of you had to go through the waiting list? Okay, yeah, so you know what I'm referring to. So basically, the reason why the waiting list was first introduced is in March 2016, is that at the time, the Monzo team was really small, and people were manually posting cards. And they were really struggling to keep up with demand. I think the peak was 5,000 cards being posted on a day. So they decided to introduce the concept of a waiting list. So when you're downloading the app and starting the sign-up process, you will see that screen that show you how many people were in front of you and how many people were behind you, and you had to wait usually 3-4 days to reach the top of the list to be able to finish sign up. If you were lucky, you would have a friend who have sent you a golden ticket, and the golden ticket will allow you to jump straight to the top of the waiting list and to complete sign up in a go. So golden tickets were really, really popular. I'm actually surprised. They're on eBay. You can still find some people selling golden tickets. Please don't buy them. There's no point. We have some much better referral schemes where actually you get some money and you don't have to pay to sign up. But basically, the company at the start of last year had reached a stage where they were able to cope with demand for the new current accounts, and they didn't really needed the waiting list anymore. There were like some people, however, in the business that were concerned that if we're like taking the waiting list away, people would stop sharing golden tickets because there would not be a need for golden tickets anymore. So there were some concerns around the referral scheme. So we decided to just like run an experiment to see what will actually like happen if we like remove the waiting list. So we took a cohort of new users back in April 2018, and to half of the cohorts, we provided like the usual experience where you have to go through a waiting list to sign up, and the rest of the cohort could just finish signing up in one go. So the first thing we realized is that the overall conversion rates of the sign-up funnel like improve by 30% because people were not interrupted, so the momentum was still there. And the second important thing, which was the key fact that we wanted to verify, is that the same proportion of users in the two groups shared referrals with their friends. So basically, like people just like enjoy the product and wanted to share like Monzo with the people around them, and they didn't need the waiting list as like an artificial barrier like to do so. So the results of that experiment motivated the decision to remove the waiting list at the end of May, and that allowed one of the product squad to start working on some better referral schemes. Another example of when we use an experiment to drive an important product decision is with like debit card top-ups. Like again, if you have been with Monzo with some time, you might remember that with like the prepaid program, you had to use debit card top-ups to add money to your account. So when we first launched the current account, the debit card top-ups had been like removed, and we got some feedback that actually some people found them like really convenient. So we introduced them back at the start of December 2017. The issue with debit card top-ups is that they were like really expensive for Monzo because we had to use a third party that was like taking a commission that was like proportional on the amount being added every time. So on average, that cost us £24 per user per year. So at this point, Samantha, who was one of our user researchers, starting reaching out to users to try to identify ways to reduce those costs. So at the start of last year, we tried different iterations, some very like simple one, like just like sending an email to a user base to try to educate users about those costs and like let them know that debit card top-up should really be used for emergencies. But that didn't really work out. Then some of you might remember Sweaty Hot Chip. So that's like the picture in the middle where you had like a hot chip just like adding corns on top of each other to like show how costly this was. And we also capped top-ups at £100. But we got some negative feedback on that experience because our users said they didn't want to feel guilty about using debit card top-ups. We also try making debit card top-ups a bit like hidden, but that felt a bit just being a bit like sneaky, so we didn't really like that either. But something that was quite interesting that we realized when running those experiments is that for most people, the first top-up experience is key, and people just like stick to that. So if you do a money transfer to add money for the first time, you will just keep doing money transfer. If you use a debit card top-ups, you will just keep using that. So it felt that actually it was more really about like convenience, and it was not like a blocker for people to add money to their accounts. So at the end of March 2018, we run experiments where we remove debit card top-ups entirely for a segment of our new users. And we realized that a similar proportion of users were like adding money to their account. And in terms of the average amount, they were like really similar across the two groups. We ran the experiment for a couple of weeks just to make sure that in the medium term, people were retaining as much without debit card top-ups done with. And that experiment motivated the decision to actually like turn off debit card top-ups for everyone. And that freed some money for the business to be working on like other things. In my last example, it's not an experiment, but it's interesting to see basically how sometimes the work of a product squad unintentionally like impacts the work of another product squad, and thanks to data analysis, they can like tie back what was like the original cause of the issue. So at Monzo, within the internal product team, there is a team called like Reductivity, and this team mission is to reduce the volume of inbound requests we get for our customers, so a customer operation team can keep up with the demand. So they do a lot of like automation. And what that team realized is that at some point at the end of last year, the number of requests for card replacement started to go up quite a bit. And at that time, another product squad was working on a new experience in sign-up called like same-day Monzo. So basically with same-day Monzo, we let users access the app, add money, and use their account straight away, thanks to Apple Pay and Google Pay. They don't have to wait anymore for the physical card to arrive by the post. So it was like a great experience on the user side, but something that the team had missed when they work on that experience is having a button for people to say that they are not received a physical card, because we basically just like forgot about the physical card. So the Reductivity team started by doing some like data analysis. They tied back the request to new users. They did like some customer interview to add a bit of like qualitative data, and they were able to give some feedback to the squad working on same-day Monzo to make the appropriate product changes to decrease the number of requests for card replacements. Yeah. So actually, sorry, this was my last example. So thank you very much for having listened to my presentation. Yeah. The last point is that if you're passionate about data or know someone who is, like the data team is hiring. So yeah, you can check for more details on the Monzo website. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Annabelle. Thank you all. We have time for a brief Q&A. So if anybody has questions, now is the time. Hands up. Have we got a microphone? Yes, Richard has got a microphone that's going to go around. So questions for Annabelle.
Great. No, it's fine. Go ahead. Hi, thanks for the talk. I think you briefly mentioned kind of using qualitative data, but you didn't really touch on it that much. Just wondering how you collect and use that data, and how do you kind of complement it alongside quantitative data?
Yeah, so thank you. That's a very interesting question, because actually that's a point we're really working on at the moment. So we have a user research team with conducting some user interviews, and we increasingly try to work with them, because what we realize is that very often, thanks to the data we see, we identify a certain user behavior, but we don't always have all the data we need to understand the underlying reasons. So doing some user interviews, like on the phone, or actually having users coming to the office, really help us to have like the full picture. There's actually a really interesting project at the moment around like user segmentation, where we run, we did like a quantitative analysis, and then the user researchers like contacted some users in each of the segments to really understand the different lifestyles. So we are like complementary, and we try to work together more often.
Two quick questions. Michael, I was among the ones that came in your at the office to do the interviews, if I'm not mistaken, about the POTS. And so you briefly said that you're still having human interface, you still have people coming into your offices to share experience or do A/B testing on person. So the first question is there any ratio, like 80% data analysis and 20% human behaviors? First question. And the second one, if there's a difference in the behavior from entering the process and daily usage among adults and the young people. You've got card for 16 years old as well. So if there's a difference in age.
So to answer your first question, so quantitative analysis is easier to scale. So as we try to move quite quickly as a business, it's true that we, like just in terms of the team size, I think like the user research team is still like a fairly small team. I think there are 2 or 3 user researchers working with Samantha at the moment, and in the data team we're like 15, and we have access to all the usage data, so we can get a lot of insights just by doing the quantitative analysis. I think we use qualitative analysis really when we feel that the quantitative data is not giving us like the full picture. In terms of like a specific like ratio, it really like depends of the case. If it's like a brand new feature that we're launching, then usually we will test it with like a small pool of people and try to talk to as many people as possible to get qualitative feedback to inform the iterations. And then once we have more people going through the flow, we can start like doing experiments and use more the quantitative analysis. For your second question, I haven't personally looked at that. I think someone else in the data team has, so I cannot like answer your question on the spot. I'm sorry.
Hi, someone there had a question? Great. Oh, both of you? Okay, anyway, you go first.
Yeah, you mentioned security and privacy. What do you do specifically in that space?
Sorry, I didn't get the first.
You mentioned data security and privacy, and I wanted to know more about what you do in that space.
Yeah. So we basically like almost no one in the business has access to PI data. So data that would allow someone to identify a specific individual. We only give access to sanitize events where we just have like the user ID and like the timestamp where like someone accomplished a given action. And very often we look at aggregated data. So it's always like how a certain cohort of people behave versus like another cohort of people. We make sure to separate the sensitive data from the rest.
Thank you. There were some great examples. The first one, you were looking at removing the waiting list, and it improved conversion rate. But did it have an adverse effect on the lifetime value of a customer because you were removing that sort of waiting period where they had to sort of suffer for it?
So that was something we fear will happen, but actually what we realized that people, by not going through the waiting list, had more like momentum and were like really like when they arrive in the app, they were like really curious to like explore the different features. So we didn't see an adverse effect on the part of the viewer.
Hi, Annabelle, and thanks for your presentation. I'm actually from the growth marketing agency that works with Monzo to help you guys grow. So I have a question about marketing. How do you use product data and product usage data to inform marketing decisions?
So actually it is another Annabelle. I was working with the marketing team. I'm personally not, but also like the team is supported by an analyst. And I know they like looking to run the same experiments we're running on the product side for like some of the social media campaigns, for example. So I think there will be some like similar process running across the two teams in the future.
Hi, I'm from New York. I only know about Monzo actually from my from my coworkers here. So we obviously don't have it over there. I never would have heard of it. But do you use data? I'm curious to look into any like competitive sets. Like for example, your biggest competitor over there would be Venmo, which is kind of what everyone's used to. So I'm just curious whether you guys have ever looked into anything in terms of like other competitor products and like what kind of data they're producing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know there are like some other teams in the business that are looking at, you know, like competitors like offering and looking at like the competitive like landscape. But it's like in the data team, we really use our like internal data. So sorry, I'm not best placed to answer that question, but there are definitely like some teams that are looking what's going on in like other parts of the world. Because especially for like financial services, people are used to different services in different regions.
So you were mentioning that very few people inside the company have access to personalized identifiable data. What mechanisms and audit processes do you have in place if such users were to access personalized data to ensure that they're being monitored if they're doing so?
Sorry.
So you say very few users have access to personal data, or very few employees in the company do. How do you have a process in place to audit and monitor if they are analyzing that data on personal individuals specifically?
Sorry, yeah. So we have, so we're using like BigQueries, and we have like different like projects. And in order for, so you have like a separate project with like the sensitive data. And in order to get access to that project, you need the approval of an administrator. So there's like a first barrier there. And then there are like other ways to monitor which projects are being used across the business. So, yeah, we have some like fairly strict barriers in place to prevent this very sensitive data to be accessed by someone who should not.
Hi there. So recently there's been a marketing campaign from another company we won't mention, saying move over Monzo. What's your comeback and how are you going to...
Well, I think, yeah, I think personally, like they did us a favor because, like, I feel like the name Monzo was, more visible than their own name. So I think a lot of people like saw this campaign and were like, oh, I don't know Monzo, and started like researching. So maybe thanks to them, we acquired some new users because we don't invest a lot in like physical marketing. We run like a campaign in the tube some months ago, but that's it. In terms of the message we want to send them, I think it's again the marketing team who's going to decide. I think we decide we're not doing anything. That's my understanding. We just.
I'd like to point out that I just think that if you run a campaign for an app, then maybe your app should be available for download when you run your advert.
Actually, I've been asked if you were acquiring another bank. I was asked, oh, you know things about Monzo, so did they buy another bank? So,
I think it's a very biased audience.
Hi, thank you. Over here, it's my name is Pierre. Thanks for the presentation tonight, lovely. Can you tell us anything about your tools? Is it open source, Python, any cloud platforms that you could share? And feel free not to share, trade secrets with us.
So we use Google platform, BigQuery for like all the dashboards and to share data across the company. We use Looker to like automate some data process. We have like Airflow, and some of us in the team, when needed, like to use Python and like notebooks to run some like more complex analysis. But yeah, maybe there are like some R people as well in the team. It's basically we're like empowered to use like the best tool for a given project.
I think we have time for one more question, so. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't pick all of you.
Hiya. I just wanted to ask, what characteristics do you look for in a product team when you work with them?
So, in what characteristics? In what?
So in terms of when you're working with a product team, how sorry, when you're working with a product team, how do you go about working with product owners and those sort of roles within your organization?
Oh, like who a product analyst who like interact and like so like at Monzo in general, like the team structures like quite like flat. So for example, like when we have like ideation session, like everyone's like collaborating. I would say as an analyst, I work mostly with like the product managers to like help them, like decide what is the key metric we should really focus on to set up our goals this quarter, or if we run an experiment. Then I tend to work quite a bit as well with the engineers who like implement the experiments and who like create the new tracking events. I work also like sometimes with like designers to understand what is like the flow a user is like going through for like a given feature. So yeah, it's like, but yeah, mostly product managers and backend engineers.
Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for questions, but thank you all for coming out. Can we get one more round of applause for Annabelle? Feel free to grab another drink if you didn't already, or if you finished it, and mingle with the various staff members and your fellow community people that are here. We'll be around just hanging out. So thank you all for coming.